What is going on, YouTube? This is Acid Root. So I'm going to review the Underworld Evolution soundtrack. Basically, this soundtrack came out in the winter of 2006, and it's the second in the series of Underworld movies. There were about 4 soundtracks. I've reviewed one of them, which was the 2009 album Underworld Rise of the Lycans. That was a particularly kind of excellent one. Had a lot of good electronic type stuff on here, but this one is good also. Definitely has like a pretty heavy hitting onslaught of songs for like the first half of this particular album, but then it kind of switches to like some more subpar ones. But I would definitely have to say this is a pretty overall jolting kind of ride, and this album just overall emits some pretty rock heavy power in terms of the Underworld fold as far as what kind of happens with that particular stuff. So I do think that the Underworld series of soundtracks are particularly pretty excellent. I would have to say I'm going to have to check out the one from 2003 and 2012 also. They definitely had some good ones, but yeah, I was saying, I was particularly fond of the Underworld 2009 soundtrack. That was definitely a pretty good one. Had some definite good hits on there. A lot of good Reinholder remixes. Had a lot of good Reinholder remixes from what I remember, and I would have to say this is another good pitch of one, but it's just kind of the concept is a little bit subpar in a sense, just because there's kind of some up-tempo moments that just don't quite hit as heavily. I kind of feel like the rock side of things just doesn't deliver as much as like the electronic kind of side of things. I kind of feel like this movie is kind of more of like a gothic kind of movie. It definitely, the Underworld movies definitely remind me of like some moody kind of gothic type tinge as far as it kind of happens in emo and like a light sense. But I would have to say the concept behind it is just a lot of good electronic kind of moody moments, but not quite as many on. There's a lot of good moody electronic kind of moments on here, but not as many as there are in like their 2009 album. I just feel like that one just had a lot better crafted ambience as far as that kind of went. There's just some ones on here that kind of have like some rousing kind of rock moments that just don't. There's kind of some ones that just kind of have like some rousing kind of rowdy kind of rocks party starters that just don't boil up to very much. I feel like a lot of these are just from a lot more low key kind of folks that just didn't quite hit as heavily as they needed to. So as a result, about half the album kind of takes a slash just as far as that kind of happens. But there is some good stuff on here. I would have to say it's definitely the concept. There's some folks. Chester Bennington's on here, which is pretty awesome. Pussifer is on here, which is by the vocalist from Tool. As far as that kind of happens, that's definitely pretty good. He was also on the 2009 album Alkaline Trio is on here, who was also on the 2009 version. William Control is on here in the form of his other band Aiden. So there's some ones on here. My Chemical Romance is on here. Hawthorne Heights is on here. There's just a lot of good big budget folks on here. Just what I'd say, it's not to say that some of these rock moments are kind of different. I just feel like they're just a little bit more vanilla and kind of more kind of substandard and kind of more subpar-esque as far as it kind of happens just in terms of the pitch. I would say from about song 8 to about song 8 to about song 16 minus like Our Truth by Lacuna Coil is basically some of those concepts as far as that kind of happens. But I'll go ahead and recommend these songs. I'm not sure if there was a single on this particular album. I just would have to say it's got some good pitches on here, and like I was saying, the first several songs that you hear are the most heavy hitting, but we'll get to some of those. But I'm just going to go ahead and recommend like the 8.5 or the 7.5 songs I recommend out of 16. So the 7.5 songs I recommend would be The Morning After by Chester Bennington, To the End by My Chemical Romance, Vermilion Part 2 by Slipknot, Burn by Alkaline Trio, The Undertaker by Pussifer, When Do I Stab Myself, also called Where Can I Stab Myself in the Ears by Hawthorne Heights, The Last Sunrise by Aiden, and then Our Truth. The almost song is Our Truth by Lacuna Coil. So I'd have to say Our Truth by Lacuna Coil is basically an almost song. This is basically like a glazed kind of Evanescence like new metal. Our Truth is basically like a glazed Evanescence like new metal tune. I would have to say it's a pretty good party starter. I would definitely have to say, and it's a decent boiler, but it's kind of vanilla. So I kind of feel like this is just basically like a carbon copy of something that Evanescence would kind of do. Some folks like that, something of that sort of pitch. Has a little bit more energy than Paramore would kind of have. But if you can think of like some new metal bands or just kind of more rap rock type feels or just kind of more gothic metal type feels that like Evanescence would do, just kind of without like Amy Lee or someone like that. That's kind of the pitch of what you get from Lacuna Coil. I would have to say it's pretty good in that sort of concept, but it's just kind of vanilla as far as that kind of happens. I kind of question like the widespread appeal of like Lacuna Coil as far as that kind of happens. I mean, I think that they are large enough as far as that kind of happens. I know they have like a series of albums. I just question how big they got and how much more hits that they had apart from this particular song as far as that kind of happens. So it's a good one. But yeah, a particular nice one on here that's pretty surprising is this Vermilion Part 2 by Slipknot. This one's definitely kind of like a morose, kind of stilled, gothic ballad of a song, I would have to say. This song is just like a great sullen kind of red wine sipper, I would have to say, and it's just an overall pretty lambent song. So this one definitely kind of accentuates like the gothic pitch of this particular movie as far as that kind of happens. Just a very wintry type one that just has like a lot of kind of moody, kind of vampiric type feels as far as that kind of happens. Just a very nice pitch. Really like the remix on this one. It's called the Blood bloodstone mix. I like the concept of that. There definitely need to be more bloodstone mixes on this particular album because this one's just pretty shrill. It's just very vampiric, like the overall cool kind of wintry vibes of this one. Pretty nice power ballad from Slipknot. It's just interesting. I don't remember the original Vermilion Part 2. I want to say it was on like Slipknot's 2004 album. I'm going to have to listen to that one, but this one's definitely pretty chill and just hits pretty heavily. Another good highlight on here is The Morning After. This is probably one of the best songs on the album. This has Chester Bennington on here, and he definitely fits like this gothic kind of moody pitch that this CD kind of has. I would have to say this is very much like a sneering kind of electro rave hit. I would have to say it's got lots of crushing bounce about it and dance rock kind of vibe. So this is just an overall highlight. This is something that I think Linkin Park might have done in like a certain sense, but this one's just a little bit more of like a solo sense from Chester as far as getting him. Morning After is just kind of getting Chester in like some kind of more dance rock kind of pitches as far as like a nightclub and kind of rave type pitch as far as that kind of happens. Just like the overall vibe of this particular one's basically one of the album's best songs. This would have to say just the overall rave energy and just overall highlighted feel of this one just has a lot of good energetic type feels and just really nails it quite well. So this is a good highlight. To the End, the R&R Cheryl mix by My Chemical Romance is definitely a pretty highlighted one. This is basically like a makeshift kind of electronic gothic pep of a song. I would have to say it's just a regular late. This song has some regular late day kind of feels about it and just like an electro sense. So this is definitely kind of one for like a makeshift type feel, something for more day-to-day kind of regular vanilla type feels, just being in the car on the way home, something like that. Just kind of after work malaise, just some dusky hours as far as that kind of happens. To the End, this has some dusky kind of after hours pep, I would have to say. Just a real good electro kind of one that just is makeshift and just kind of works in like a more thrilling kind of sense, just in like kind of makeshift, kind of day-to-day, but just also has the concept of having some thrills about it where you might go out and have some time as far as that kind of happens. It's kind of a wind down song, but also kind of one where you just are winding down to just get ready to get into like recreation mode as far as that kind of happens. It's a good one for that. Burn is a pretty nice one. This is by Burn, the Alleged remix is by the Alkaline Trio. I'd have to say this is a nice mid-pace kind of electric snaz. Burn is kind of a nice mid-pace kind of electric snaz thriller. I would have to say it's a very in motion kind of song. It's just some solid. This song is just some solid ruminating, I would have to say, and it's pretty much like a gothic kind of errands tune, I would have to say. So it's just an overall highlighted one. Really like the melodies on this particular one. I think the Alkaline Trio do a great job of this particular one. I think they had a highlighted one on their 2009 album by Underworld also. The Alkaline Trio song on Underworld, Rise of the Lycans from 2009 was a pretty good song on there. So I recommend checking out their song on that album too. It's just a good concept. But this one's just a really nice electric kind of one that just works pretty heavily and just has some great melodies on there, I would have to say. Pretty good one. Another good highlight on here is The Undertaker, which is by another good song on here is The Undertaker, which is by Pussifer. I would have to say this is basically like a jazzy kind of electric dance club boiler, I would have to say. Hollywood Undead used this beat on their song. Hollywood Undead used this beat on their song Dove and Grenade from 2009. Definitely like that one. That was off of Desperate Measures. Definitely pretty good pitch. Deuce had a really excellent hook on there, so he nailed that one. But this one doesn't quite have the heaviness of like the Deuce hook, but this is still a pretty good, nice one. This one doesn't quite have the heaviness of the Deuce hook, but it is a pretty nice song to kind of have overall. I'd have to say it's just a stretching kind of ghoulish hit. Definitely, and just overall works pretty damn well. So I do like the Reinholder remix. I like the Reinholder mixes on the 2009 album, so I definitely have to say there's not a ton of Reinholder mixes on this particular one, which is really too bad. I just would wonder what he would have done with this particular album. But this one is at least a pretty stellar one to kind of have as far as that kind of happens. And then the song When Do I Stab Myself by Hawthorne Heights is basically like a dusky, kind of muggy, gothic haze of a song, I would have to say. It's a nice, murky, kind of haunting feel that it has, and it's definitely a pretty good mosh pit kind of song. So this is definitely a pretty nice one. Kind of has two kind of muggy, kind of dusky kind of verses on the song, and then it basically has like some in-betweener kind of mosh type energy that just hits pretty heavily. This is one of the few up-tempo kind of rock-heavy type songs that works pretty damn well. Definitely feel like it needed like the murkiness. That's definitely what this album needed, is more songs like this one and The Morning After with Chester Bennington. These two ones had the most. So I mean, there's definitely like all 7.5 of the songs I recommend are pretty good highlighted ones, but these are definitely some dusky kind of ones. When this album kind of has more of like a rock sense, I definitely feel like some of these just hit heavier when they have like that ghoulish kind of corn and kind of like mushroom head type feel as far as that kind of happens. It definitely needed something in that sort of pitch as far as that kind of goes. This definitely would have worked a lot heavier, but this one, Hawthorne Heights, really surprised me. It's just a good overall pitch that just has like some kind of duskiness. Just overall just worked pretty damn well. And then Aiden's song, The Last Sunrise, is a pretty nice one. I like the fact that William Control is kind of affiliated with like some of these Underworld soundtracks. So this is his other band. This is Aiden, I would have to say. This is basically like a ghastly, kind of muggy, doomed sounding kind of haze of a song, I would have to say. It's just a nice winter rock edge that this song particularly has, and it's just an overall glazed hit. I really like the ghastly and kind of ghoulish build-up that this song has for like the first minute or so that it kind of happens. But this overall has like some demonic kind of feels about it. This is another kind of rock song that works pretty well on here. There's not not many rock songs on this particular album that work better than the electronic ones, but this one just kind of has like the right amount of kind of muggy type feel about it, and like an electronic sense that also has some rock edge about it that just works pretty damn well. So this is a good example. I'm gonna have to check out some of the music that Aiden did, because I definitely like the concept of seeing it just from this particular song. Some good pitches, and I can kind of hear the guy from William Control. He kind of is in like the middle of the song. I think the rock verse is in between this song a little bit different, but the kind of hook on here is just a little bit. I can tell that was William Control on here. He at least did some background vocals, something like that. He was on the song. Just you can hear him different from the rest of the verses on the album. So to talk about some of the songs I didn't enjoy on here, there's just a lot of these kind of heavier rock type tunes on here, like the ones by Trivium and Mendoza and Atriu, and some of these ones by like Trivium and Mendoza and Atriu and Senses Fail and some of those type ones. There's just a lot of kind of more up tempo kind of rock type tunes that just don't really carry the pitch quite as well. They just kind of feel like background music for like some kind of flat kind of more rock rap. Or they just kind of feel like some flat kind of 2000s era rock type music that just was trying to be party stars that just didn't quite nail it as well. I kind of feel like they just were very limp. I just feel like the concept behind these, maybe it's just the fact that the bands just needed more distinction. But I just look after these, they just didn't really carry the energy as far as what was probably necessary. I think they just probably needed like a more heavy hitting band. They could have used someone like Moto Grader or someone like that, one of those type folks to kind of have done it. But I just look after, there's just a lot of odd ones on here. I kind of felt like the Bobby Gold song was trying to be like a house party type tune that just was a little bit dreary more than it needed to be. I mean, I liked the first verse, but later on it just kind of really became some dredge that just didn't work out that well. The Gosling song was just kind of an awkward one. That one just kind of had like a kind of piano type feel or something, just a different kind of pitch that was just different, and then it became like a rock song towards the end of the song. That one was just kind of an awkward one, kind of strange one as far as I kind of went. And then like Suicide, and then there were some kind of like doomed black metal type songs near the end with like this Meat Beat Manifesto and Cradle of Filth. I wanted to say I would have liked the Cradle of Filth song, but it just didn't really carry the energy as far as what it needed to. I feel like that was probably for like a movie more like Freddy vs. Jason or one of those type movies, like a more horror type movie. I feel like, Underworld's just more gothic and kind of moodiness and just kind of in like a real shrill kind of cold kind of Chester Bennington type sense more than like a black metal kind of sense. That's just kind of the concept. But I do like Cradle of Filth. I'm gonna have to check out some of their stuff, but it just kind of felt like this was the wrong movie and kind of pitch for a theme as far as that kind of went. But that's just kind of the concept. There were some black metal and kind of metalcore songs on here that just didn't work that well. So that's kind of the thing about it. So me basically recommending 7.5 songs out of 16 on here. I'm gonna go ahead and give this album basically like a 5.75 out of 10. I'm raising the score just because me liking almost 8 songs out of 16 on a soundtrack album is not common. I feel like the last time it's just not very frequent. I did give like the Underworld Rise of the Lycans soundtrack like a 9 out of 10. I like that album better just because it had more electronic type feels and bigger names. But this one definitely has a pretty bravado and shocking kind of ensemble in like the first 7 or 8 songs. But I just would have to say like beyond that, it just kind of gets to like some limp kind of party starters that just don't do this album justice, and then like some other awkward ones besides that. So that's kind of the concept. So 5.75 out of 10. The social score though, I'm gonna give like a 6.75 to, because I feel like there's definitely some good gems on here, more than, or at least the social score I'm going to give like a 6.75 to, because about half the album has at least some good party starters and just things like that, some good electronic kind of fair and gothic kind of energy that just, there's just some real kind of gothic and moody energy that just hits pretty heavily and just carries the right theme and just overall social ambience as far as that kind of happens. So it's just got some real, this album just has some good and snaring ones that just hit pretty well, I'd have to say. So that's kind of the concept about it. But in terms of the future, that's difficult just because the Underworlds are movies. So that's kind of the concept about it. But they do have there's at least 2 other ones that I haven't reviewed them eventually going to get to. Unfortunately, the Underworld movie from 2017 only had like a score, and I've been complaining about that with a number of movie soundtracks nowadays, that they just only have a score and not a soundtrack with like artists on there and things like that. So it's kind of a problem, but there's at least 4 Underworld soundtracks that I'll get to, and I reviewed one of them, so you can check that one out also. But this is kind of solid here, but there is some bunk on here, but at least half the album has some good stuff on here, definitely for recommending.